fall into a trap of thinking I don't have enough tools to make nice work. Rather than wallow in this self-pity, as I've been known to do, I thought I'll set myself a bit of a challenge. I want to see if I can make something using firewood. Every year, my wife and I add a new decoration to the tree. Here are the last 4 years. Each of these either is a special moment, a special place, or more realistically, something that my wife just fell in love with because it was really cute. And this year, life got in the way, and each time we went to look for a new Christmas tree decoration, we just couldn't find one that spoke to us. Meanwhile, this year, we had a family of birds. 2 parents raised 3 chicks in our garden. So I thought, why don't I create a bird ornament for the Christmas tree that will remind us of our time here. We moved house and we've been here for 1 year now. As I did it, I didn't realise how many animal/bird themed decorations we already had, but isn't that the way? So I knew what I wanted to make with what, and it was just time to crack on and give it a go. The great thing about firewood is that it's already been dried. You can get kiln dried firewood. So that's what I've used for this project. The tools on the table are what I used, and for the wood, firewood as you've seen, and then 2 bits of down, and that was everything. So I've got this piece of firewood, believe it or not, cleaned up using my recently created router sled, and I'm going to make a Christmas ornament from it. So there's just a couple of things I need to be aware of. There is some quite large cracks on this end, so I'll try and avoid this end as much as I can, and probably create the carving going in this direction. So I'll just make a little note of that one. I'm going to start by doing some drawings. I want to get a general feel for the shape, and then I'm going to do a profile, and then probably a straight on and back view. And then I'm also going to just really simplify the shapes in my mind, so that when I start hacking this out from the block, I can imagine what it would look like in its simplest form, in its most square format, in effect. So I've got this here so that I can look at some images of these birds, remind myself what they look like. Let's get going. Okay, so I've carved out some time, pardon the pun, in the workshop to spend a bit more time on this, hopefully make some more progress. So when I was last working on this and filming, it was a chaotic time. I was unhappy with this shape here, which wasn't too big a deal, but I thought I could maybe do better. And so I just created this shape. I've been able to get it pretty close to what the wood was before, so I've got the pink coming through here and the grey on the other side. I need to shape it down, but I was filming an absolute comedy of errors. Didn't quite fit as snugly as I wanted to, so I made my own filler using dust from having sanded and wood glue. And so I was mixing the filler and it was just not going right. I hadn't set myself up to clamp this, it's quite an awkward shape to clamp because of the curve. So it was sliding around, so then I ended up drilling. I wasn't intending to use a drill. Drilling and screwing, pull this part in for the glue drying. I was making a mess up here with this homemade filler, filling in some areas that I'd basically torn out. I was carving against the grain and had taken chunks out, and it was no longer smooth. So yeah, it was just a messy, chaotic time. And I was filming it, and I was kind of aware that I was embarrassed of what I would be showing through the filming, because it was, as I say, a comedy of errors. But I then checked the footage, and there was an issue with the camera, and it stopped filming. So none of my sins were actually recorded, so I didn't need to admit any of this. But here I am. It was my hope that I would show the rough with the smooth, pardon the carving pun, which I haven't been able to do in this case. I think I'm going to have a real headache getting this smooth, and the fact that it doesn't even curve around here might mean it doesn't even join up with a nice transition, so I might have to fill it in some more. It's my intention to have it kind of separate to the tail part but blended into the body. So yeah, all of that to say, recording didn't record, you missed chaos, maybe not such a bad thing, and now I've got some work to do. I need to take off a large portion of this corner. I want to essentially blend this right down low, so I've got a lot to take out. I guess if I was really thinking straight, I would have taken this corner out before curving these edges. And it is going to be tricky because I think I'll need to use a chisel, but I need to be careful not to break all my way through. And I will need to remove the screw at some point so I don't chisel the screw. That won't be great for the chisel or the screw. So yeah, I got my work cut out, and some of it is undoing a mistake to cover up a mistake, which I didn't really need to cover up. But such is the way when you when you're stuck with a bit too much perfectionism, which I can find myself, even with something that I fully know won't turn out perfect anyway. So anyway, I'm going to pop on a podcast and get sorting. So, last session I spent on this, I took quite a dramatic decision and decided I was going to use some wood filler. Not homemade this time. There's nothing wrong with my homemade stuff, but I just don't have enough dust to make the amount that I needed. I just wanted to smooth out this shape here. So I'm going to take some sandpaper now because it's all disintegrating off and I don't want that. I'll start with my high grit at 80. I'll drop lots of things as I always do. And then one thing I do want to do today is, it's risky, but I'm going to take a bit of this profile down with a chisel. It is risky, but getting to the point now where I just want results. So let's dive in. Okay, so this is the bit I've been putting off, half tactically, half not. The head, and it's been useful to be able to keep in the vise with this shape. But yeah, now I need to turn it into a sphere. I'm going to drill a hole for the beak, but I think I can do that once it's a sphere. With this, yeah, because I've got a good hold on the body in the vise, so I'll be able to do that as a sphere. So yeah, let's get going. I'm learning as I go that the order of operations here are saw, chisel, file, sandpaper. I'm not going to be able to saw into this, I don't think, because I risk the rest of the body. So chisel, I'm just going to take it really gently, really easy. I'll just draw a rough circle here. And I'll start by turning this into a cylinder. And what that really means is that's a terrible cylinder. I'll take off these corners essentially with very gentle chisel. So, next step is the beak. And I've got two options here. I've got this dowel, which is 0.5. I've got this, which is 1. Maybe even bigger actually, only 12. Yeah, around 1. And I can either shape this to fit. I'm thinking of doing it at a slight angle so it would have some character. Obviously not Pinocchio, but. Or alternatively, still at an angle, this. And it's tricky. I think it is going to be this big boy. So what I'm going to do is but it's hard because that means then putting a big old hole in here. If it doesn't work out, it's not ideal. I think what I'm going to do is get this down into a point so I can drill a much smaller drill bit. I need to taper this down like a vampire stake. So once I've drilled this in, I can just tap this down. It's going to be a bit tricky. I'm not massively looking forward to drilling into this guy's face, but without a beak, what is he? So let's crack on. I've accidentally cut that to exactly 40 millimeters. I'm going to make the beak 20 mil, and the part that goes into the head 20 mil. So let's make a mark. There we go. It wobbled around a bit, so it's not the perfect line, but it's definitely not the perfect line. I'll just work back from that. So what I think I'm going to do to begin with, you know what, I'll actually use a chisel for this. Let's get a piece of scrap. So I'm scoring all the way along to give myself a sharp edge to basically cut a knife wall. And I think my next step, as you can see, I'm cutting this on the fly. My next step might be just to pare it back very slightly, so that knife wall is not working to a specific edge. And just change my mind about where I'm going to start. I was going to start with a beak, but actually I don't want to be tapering this and then accidentally blow out what I've spent time on the beak. So instead, I'll do the opposite. So this is just butted up against the clamp, holding my scrap on. It's not perfect, but it will do. So now I'm just going to take my time and just gently pare this down. Sometimes a mallet stops you putting body weight lines in it. Which can be quite helpful. It looked like that one was driving in much deeper than all the others, which is why I stopped it short. Need to be careful because I've taken away lots of the support. Right, I made a fairly big hash of that, and I was very close to putting it down and starting afresh. So yesterday my camera died. I continued on as if that wasn't the case, but this was the progress I was able to make. So I finished whittling this, almost giving up on it because of a bit of a botch on the dowel that goes in. I then drilled into the face of the bird. I used this as my guide for how much depth. So this, with a bit of whittling, now sits in nicely there. It's not a super tight fit, but it fits. And I just spent a tiny bit of time just trying to shape it slightly around the curve of the face, of the head. It's quite useful that it's got a bit of a twisting because I can get it to a place where I want it. So my plan for today is to finish, I like to think, but every step of this is taking longer than I expected. I'm going to smooth out the chest to try and get a bit more of a blend between the head and the chest. There's a lot of material there though, so we'll see how it goes. And I'm going to blend in the face slightly using the file. That one, I think, won't be too much of an effort. I might start with a knife just to get the basics out. And then, a part which I really have been saving to the end, even more than the other parts I've been saving to the end, the feet. Because the feet are going to be very fiddly. I've got a plan for it, but it's going to be fiddling. As I've mentioned, it's a Christmas ornament, so I'll be hanging it, so the feet are going to be very delicate, but not weight bearing. So I hope that will get the job done. And I'll have to find the centre of balance for hanging it, because I wouldn't want it to end up on the tree, hanging at a really awkward angle, which is probably going to happen if I do it on there. Few things for me to be getting on with. That's probably the centre around there. First of all, let's shade a bit off this. So I think I've finished the eyes. When I look at it in here, it's a bit comical. So this is my way of judging. I'll just kind of eyeball it. But by countersinking slightly, I think that will help. And it's also going to accentuate what I had already started with, a slight face shape here of the bird rather than a pure sphere. I've cut into cylindrical shapes there, which I think was what I was seeing from my reference images of these birds. So I think there's nothing else for it but to drill, which is scary but necessary. So let's mark the holes. I'm just going to have a quick look at my reference. So I think I'll go in about there and maybe just up slightly. I am eyeballing it, pardon the pun. So that should position the bird's eyes at the side of its face. And I'll be sure to drill in at that angle, because I recently, randomly, spontaneously drew a bird, maybe this was on my subconscious, and I positioned its eyes slightly to the front, and it was not good. It looked very strange. Turns out that's a key feature of birds, eyes to the side. Right, this is a bit of a make it or kill it moment, so let's see what happens. I inherited quite a few drill bits from my great uncle, which I was very grateful for, and I'm reminded of him whenever I use them, but lots of them were very blunt, and I put off for a long time replacing any of my drill bits because of the sentimental nature of it, and I'd also just built up in my head that they'd be very expensive to replace. But I really recommend getting a decent, very small drill bit, and this one is for wood and metal and plastic maybe, and it just makes a big difference for my pilot holes. They're not as expensive as I built them up to be, and they're worth it. Now, how can I clamp this? Hold it steady. Now, just want to go very shallow with this. Don't want it to clash. Don't want it to extend too deep. I don't want it to rip this bird's face off. Probably not the best drilling form there, drilling towards my own hand. Sort of thing you think about afterwards. Now, I really hope I'm not going to end up with this strange forward-facing bird that I spoke about. Now, to be honest with you, there is a small part of me that is tempted to leave it like that, go for the Roman trick of not having a sphere in there at all and letting the shadow do the work for you. Because I'm just a bit nervous that these guys are going to look ridiculous. Yeah, you know what? That's definitely what my gut is saying. I was always worried that these were a bit too big. You can see there they're just a bit whack, whereas there's a bit more subtlety to that. And I could always, if I needed to, paint the eye. Tell you what, I'm going to use the line of the countersink. I'm just going to follow that profile. Just gently carve with it to turn it into a bit more of a feature. And this was only really possible because the drill created a really nice clean cut, which is what means that I can now go in and work with it. Just hope I haven't created an angry bird. So there we go. It is facing very, very slightly forwards. And I could probably skim off a bit of the side to make it look less so like that. It's also just something not quite right about the beak. Can't quite put my finger on it. But I'll need to stop somewhere. You have to finish a project sometime, don't you? Sometimes, you know, when you look at a project, you think, how many hours? Probably best not to think like that. Part of me is thinking, stop, don't go any more with this chisel. The other part of me is thinking, oh, if I just get in that tiny bit of texture. And as you can see, the second voice is winning. And the first voice is poised to say, told you so. Right, let's get this guy wrapped up. Feet, that's what's next. My plan is cut a length of this and then carve out the talons, which is going to be a bit fiddly, but I think it'll be a job for a chisel. Just to give you an insight into what I'm thinking. These will be the legs in this thinner down. Okay, this next part is a bit tricky because there's some wacky angles involved for the legs. So the legs are going to be splayed, let's see, from the back here, they're going to come forwards and out. And I'm kind of in between minds of whether to just go for it or just spend a moment. Or yeah, maybe create a template. Yeah, I think the template's winning out. So maybe between the feet, the sense of the 3 centimetres. Central foot there, central foot there. And then probably got 4.2 mil to play with in between. So if I do a centre line there, and then run that back. Just as easily use scissors for this, and this is just a piece of cardboard for some biscuits. So that's close but slightly off. Yeah, that's better. So I'll be able to use this as my guide and try and use it as a drill bit guide as well. Let's just see how it's looking. Is that essentially? Now the only tricky thing about this is ensuring that I hold it the same for both drilling operations to make things a little easier for myself. Okay, I'm going to fold this in half so that I can see it. That's about right. I'm going to use it to hold onto there, but now this is that I'm also now went too far with that, went all the way through, but alas. There we go, got both those drilled. Did go through on both of them, which was a bit reckless, but not too worried. More carefree than I should be, perhaps. It's just very important with this one that I don't do the same. I'm going to take even more time with this one. I'm hoping, because I've lost my angle reference, hoping that this will just guide it through, and I'm really going to go very light on this. I've only gone a very small way in. Do I go in any further? Yeah, why not? Okay, happy with that. Now I'm going to cut 2 legs. They're going to be this long. Okay, I'll take this down, but not as dramatically as in my test. Have I knocked the other one off? Got lucky. Okay, so these are looking fairly uniform, which is good. Tease myself to see if this helped. Yeah, I mean, that's not bad. That's not bad. They're going to be slightly shorter than I realised because of the dowel that sits inside. But you know what? That was worth it. I have got to say that was so worth it. It barely took me any time, but yeah, I dread to think what that would have been like if I hadn't had that little template and the folding in half. That was, I mean, I'm being that arrogant because I'm so surprised that I came up with that. There we go. There is the little chappy. Last thing to do, put a hook in it, but I'll stand it up a bit more, which I'm not really looking forward to. Would you like to come and see what I've been working on?
Should I close my eyes?
Sure. Okay.
Oh, look! Oh, it's so beautiful! Oh my gosh, how did you do that? I love it so much. Oh, can I touch it?
Yeah, it's this year's Christmas decoration.
Oh, look at it. That's so beautiful. Wow, you did a really good job.
Thank you.
Oh, look at him. Oh, wow. That's very good.
Thanks.
Oh, I love how he stands up.
Yeah, he's going to have a hook. So
Okay.
it won't stand,
Mm-hmm.
but it'll have a hook on
Uh-huh.
the centre of gravity, which
Uh-huh.
is probably about there.
Uh-huh.
I think, if you agree.
Yeah,
Look there.
wherever.
Do you think I should do anything more with the beak? Do you think it should be any smaller or?
No, I think
Okay.
it's great just like it is.
It's-
Oh, that was disturbing. Oh, he's
But that was firewood. Yeah.
Whoa!
Yeah. So you know that? Do you remember the firewood that I
Oh
processed?
yeah.
Yeah. And it's quite nice because it's got like almost like red brass.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make him look forward because it's not quite.
Yeah.
So I've done him, and it
No,
gave
he's perfect.
a bit of character by looking to one side. Thank you. Those are my little drawings that I did to get ready for him.
Oh.
Thanks, Amanda.
Oh, he's so cute. Okay, I have to get my phone's going off.
All right.
Oh, excellent. Very good. It's very good.
Thank you.
Oh.
Okay, so it's been a long journey to get to this point, but time to finish it off with some sandpaper. Now, it's actually very handy at this point being able to take the beak off for this finishing. So I won't glue that in until right at the end, and probably the same with the legs and the feet. I'll probably wait until right to the end to glue those permanently. Whenever I make anything, I quite like, I mean it's not just making things, it's buying tools as well. I quite like leaving them as versatile as possible. So there's a part of me that's tempted not to glue any of this together because then I can make changes or fix it more easily, but I think it makes more sense to glue it. When it comes to the finish, I've got lots of marks here from the file. I'm going to sand, but I'm not necessarily going to sand them away. And actually at the end, once it's sanded, I might do something a bit wacky and come back in with the file because I feel like it gives it a bit of texture, almost, dare I say, feathery texture. So we'll see what happens. Always an exciting moment, putting a finish onto a piece of that you've been working on. So, really excited. I've sanded it down. Let's dive in. I'm using this wax-based finish. It smells great. It smells like honey and vanilla. It's got a child lock on it. I'd normally put it on with a cloth, but I want to use this to buff it off, so. Amazing. So always love it. Before and after, this was the donor piece. And I have to remind myself, this was firewood. This was going to be burnt. There's a time and a place for firewood, but look at that. It's just amazing. Always my favourite part. Is unlocking the wood that's hiding beneath, unlocking the finish. I'll leave it to soak in and then I'll polish it off. I'll probably also then sand it one more time and then one more coat. A little thank you to the tools that have helped me with this. I just took the excess that was on my hand of this finish, which I really. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the process. Of all the videos you could have clicked on and watched, you clicked on this one, and I really appreciate that. So thank you very much. I hope you're inspired to get out and make something, even if you've just got a small space and not many tools. So I'm really pleased to have this wrapped up. It took a long time. It was hard work, just using the handful of tools that you saw. Apart from the drill, no power. I've got this here just to quickly show you, this is the offcut from this, that it really was firewood, and maybe around there. And there's some things that I wanted to share that I personally have learned, and maybe it'll help you if you're interested in a similar carving project. So the first thing that I would say that I've learned is that firewood is viable for your project, but depending on the firewood, it might be rock solid, especially with the knife, it was really hard work. But there's a few things going on here. One is that the harder work it is, the less likely you are to just with one slip remove the shape that you were looking for, the form that you're after. So there are pros and cons to the fact that it's solid. One of the pros of firewood is that it is dramatically cheaper than going out and purchasing a hardwood. But you know, you get inconsistencies, you get splits as you would with any wood. That's part of the beauty of it. So firewood, yes and no. And this was genuinely part of, maybe around, yeah, probably around there, part of this. And this has just got the finish on now. So that's what I learned about firewood, some of what I learned. I also learned it's going to be harder and harder to burn any of it in the fire, because look what it could become. The second thing that I did within this project and learned is that right towards the end, when I was getting ready to do the legs, part of me was just tempted to just go for it and just look at it by eye, try and drill it in. But there were a few things going on here. I had two specific points within the feet that I needed to hit. I only had a certain amount of area to hit here. Add to that this double angle. There are two things going on. One is going tapering in, and two is tapering backwards. So I have got a tendency to overthink and overcomplicate things, but I thought, okay, I'll make a template. I don't want to spoil the work that I've done so far. And as you've seen, simple template, and it worked really, really well. And without this template, this would have been a real challenge. So if you get to a point within your projects and there's just something a bit more accuracy required, I really would recommend thinking about how can I quickly get something mocked up that's going to help me here. In this case, a bit of card that I could fold in half to get my angle. The third thing that I wanted to share is that although I was using simple tools, a chisel, this carving knife, there is nuance to these tools. And this was a great example because with this knife, I can do different things. If I use the end of the blade, I can carve out flatter sections. If I use this end of the blade, I can really get some quite neat detail. And I learned along the way that I could, for example, rock this, so to do the detail around the neck. I'm not going to touch this anymore with this knife. I could kind of roll in and use it to create the shapes. And then when I needed something lower down with less support, I could use areas like this. So same with the chisel, I was really getting a feel for how to go around, not round corners, but just take off less and less. And so they're very simple tools, but as you use them, you will become a bit more aware of the nuance that you can bring to using this tool. All of that to say is, you can use this in multiple ways. The fourth thing I wanted to share with you that is similar to the point that I've just made is save the hardest parts till last. So I was dreading carving out the feet here, I was dreading the head. So instead, I saved those hard parts till last. That sounds counterintuitive, but the reason I did that, and it did pay off, is by the time that I went to do these parts, I'd become a lot more aware of what I could do with the tool. I was just more comfortable using the tool, and that really benefited me when it came to the more intricate parts. So my advice, save the hardest parts till last, because you have more of a feel by that point for the wood and for the tool that you're using. My fifth tip that is advice for myself is to embrace the imperfections. During this project, the shape that I'd cut with the saw, roughed out, just wasn't quite matching the profile that I wanted here. And I had two options. One, I could ignore it and carry on. Two, I could tweak it, but I knew that it wouldn't be perfect. So I added this part here, and I had to use filler. I had to use filler in this area here where I'd cut slightly too deep and the saw's teeth had just torn out an area on the back. And I also had to use filler here where I got tear out using a chisel, I think. But I just decided to embrace these imperfections. I decided to embrace the filler. I definitely have a tendency to overthink, to have this perfection tendency. But with this, I thought, I'll just go with it. Think about what this is. It's a special item for my wife and I. I'm not selling it. It's going to belong with us. It's going to come out once a year. At Christmas time, it's okay that there's very obvious filler. And actually, having embraced that, it gives me an opportunity to look at this and think, those imperfections add something. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it would have looked even better without, but they work for me. The imperfections work. And the other thing that I'll share, which I've kind of spoiled by showing you some of the imperfections, is that when you make something, you know every imperfection. You know where the marks are, where you slipped, where your chisel nicked that, where the knife cut slightly too deep, etc. But no one else does. And yes, someone could spend a lot of time doing exactly what I'm doing and analysing it and turning it around in their hands, but realistically, this is going to sit in the Christmas tree and no one is going to know the imperfections like you know the imperfections. So don't overthink it. Don't worry about the imperfections, because it's just you. You're the only person that's aware of them. The final thing that I wanted to share was, as I got going with this, I thought, oh my goodness, I wish I'd made this slightly smaller, because if it was smaller, it wouldn't take as long to get certain shapes using the file, using the chisel, using the carving knife. There was part of me that thought this would be quicker if this was smaller. However, when it came time for the details, I then realised the smaller the items are, the harder they are to hold, whether that's using this built-in vice into this table or even holding my hand. So by the time I got down to the parts like the eyes, and I didn't end up using these are actually really fiddly, really hard to hold, and it just puts your fingers at risk basically when you're holding it with the knife. I was always trying very hard to ensure that my fingers were behind and above the blade, but when you're just holding these tiny parts, it gets harder and harder. So I don't know exactly where I stand on that. Whether if I was to do this again, would I go smaller? For example, would I start with, let's say, this size, which was just an offcut? There is actually, I can see a bird within that. Or would this actually become harder to hold? And would it be all too easy just to take too much off in one swoop? Suddenly you've taken too much and it ends up getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So that final point is less of an obvious lesson, more of something for me to think about, and maybe for you to think about if you're considering a similar carving project. The size, the smaller it goes, the faster it will be to file, to chisel, etc. The more likely you are to slip and take a larger detail off. The larger it is, the longer it takes to work it. It's a larger area. This took a really long time, even though when you look at it as an object, it's very small. When I look at it as a carved object, it took me a long time. So something to think about there. I'm going to throw in one more bonus piece of advice, and it's a piece of advice that I didn't take, and I don't even know if I take it in the future, but I'll share it anyway. And that's the order of operation. I think this project would have gone faster if I tried to be a bit more disciplined about the order of tools that I used. So, saw first. Saw everything that I can saw. A saw is great for taking off a large amount of material. Then second, it would be the chisel to take off the finer parts that you couldn't take off with the saw. Then the knife, which adds even more nuance and detail. So this is, you're getting smaller and smaller, and you're able to get to some of the details that you wouldn't risk with a chisel. And then finally the file. So the file is then smoothing any area and turning it, I guess, from a really obviously carved object with all the marks of a knife into a smooth object. And then you've got sandpaper. Now, in reality, I would come at this, I would saw a bit off, I'd then use a chisel, I'd then use a file, I'd then use a knife, I'd then realise actually I haven't quite got the shape, I'll go back to the chisel. I don't know if there's any avoiding that, but I know it would have been slightly quicker if I'd had a bit more of a process in order of how much material I can remove. But it's all learning, isn't it? And I enjoyed this. It was almost painful enjoyment at times because it took so long, but I have an object now that will sit on our tree and will come out every year. I'm going to carve in the date and also our current location into the bottom here, and we'll enjoy it for a long time to come, I hope. So it was worth it. I hope those tips help if you are thinking of doing something yourself. The reason that I did this, and the reason that I hope that you might consider doing a project like this, is because it was me telling myself I don't need the perfect place to buy wood, and I don't need all the tools. I just need to give myself the time and the permission to be creative and to create something that isn't perfect but is mine, is my wife's, and doesn't exist anywhere else on earth. This is a totally unique one-off thing, and even if I tried to make one of these again, it would still be totally unique. And isn't that what being human is all about?